Reno is facing a rapidly escalating wildfire emergency tonight, and what looked like a fast-moving brush fire just a day ago has turned into a major threat to the city. The Hawk Fire has now pushed beyond 15,000 acres, according to late Sunday reports, while containment remains at 0%. Around 42,000 people are under mandatory GEO-now evacuation orders. Another 45,000 are in warning areas, and the evacuation zone has reached the edge of the University of Nevada, Reno campus. That means roughly 90,000 people are now inside the combined evacuation zones. And this is happening at the same time the rest of the West is already dealing with an enormous wildfire burden. The latest National Interagency Fire Center report lists 79 large fires being managed across the country, with more than 22,000 firefighters and support personnel assigned. The Northwest has the highest concentration of fire activity, and Oregon and Washington together account for 28 of the large fires in the current state-by-state breakdown. Across the country, active fires are covering more than 3.5 million acres, while the 2026 year-to-date total has climbed above 7.7 million acres. That is 169% of the 10-year average for acreage burned. So this is not just a Reno story. It is a much larger Western wildfire story with one dangerous pattern connecting many of these fires: dry fuels, low humidity, shifting winds, and new ignitions appearing faster than crews can comfortably handle them. But Reno is where the situation is most urgent right now. The Hawk Fire started Saturday near Hawk Meadow Trail, about a mile north of Cold Creek Trail in the Somerset area, northwest of Reno. It moved through grass and brush and quickly found the kind of dry vegetation that can turn a relatively small ignition into a fast-moving wall of fire. Officials say the fire was human-caused, although the specific circumstances remain under investigation. What makes this fire so concerning is how quickly the numbers changed. Sunday afternoon, officials were reporting about 13,000 acres burned and zero containment. By Sunday evening, reports indicated the fire had crossed the 15,000 acre mark. That is roughly 23 square miles of land, and it happened in a remarkably short period of time. The human impact is already severe. 6 people have been injured, including 3 civilians and 3 first responders. Multiple structures have been damaged or destroyed, and thousands of homes and businesses have lost power. The evacuation area has expanded so far that the GEO-now zone has reached the edge of the University of Nevada, Reno campus, and authorities are not using a cautious evacuation message here. They are telling people in the GEO-now area to leave. That distinction matters. A warning means you should be ready to go. A mandatory GEO-now order means you should already be leaving. In a fire that is moving quickly and behaving unpredictably, waiting to see flames from your neighborhood can leave you with fewer roads, heavier traffic, and fewer options. One of the biggest problems has been transportation. Portions of US 395 have been closed because the fire and emergency operations have disrupted one of the major north-south routes through the Reno area. Fire behavior has been fast enough to complicate firefighting operations and evacuation traffic at the same time. Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo has declared a state of emergency in Washoe County, and the Nevada National Guard has been activated to help with the response. Firefighters and first responders from state, local, federal, and international resources are on scene, along with aircraft. Another emergency response team, Nevada Task Force 1, was deployed Sunday night to support search and recovery operations beginning Monday. And there is another reason this fire is so difficult tonight. The weather is giving crews very little room for error. The Sunday forecast called for temperatures around 84 to 86 degrees, minimum humidity between 25 and 30%, and southwest winds strengthening through the afternoon with gusts around 15 to 20 miles per hour. The National Weather Service in Reno has also warned that smoke from the fire will continue affecting air quality and visibility around Reno and Sparks, while winds are expected to increase later in the week. Those numbers might not sound extreme on their own, but put warm temperatures, dry grass and brush, low humidity, and a rapidly changing wind direction together, and the fire can behave very differently from one hour to the next. That is why crews are trying to establish defensive lines around the communities most exposed to the fire. Dozers are being used to build fuel breaks, particularly along the southern and eastern portions of the fire, while firefighters work to keep the blaze from pushing toward Cold Springs and the more developed parts of the Reno area. And while Reno is dominating the headlines, Washington is dealing with a wildfire that has been burning for more than a month. The Little Giant Fire in Washington has now grown to roughly 144,800 acres and remains only 15% contained. Updated tracking based on NIFC and WFIG's data shows the fire continuing to expand even after weeks of firefighting. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 145,000 acres on one fire. Little Giant began in mid-July, and the long duration is part of what makes it so difficult. Crews are not simply trying to stop a single advancing flame front. They are working across a huge and complicated landscape, building containment lines, protecting communities, and preparing backup lines in case weather causes the fire to move. A community meeting for the Little Giant fire is scheduled for Monday evening at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, giving residents another opportunity to hear directly about the latest operations and risks. And this fire has become an example of just how stretched the wildfire response system is becoming. International assistance has been coming into the United States during this extreme season. Australia and New Zealand have sent firefighters and incident management support to help with western U.S. fires. On Oregon's Grasshopper Fire, for example, an Australia/New Zealand incident management team has been part of the unified command structure. That is not something you normally notice during an ordinary fire season. When crews have to be brought in from the other side of the world to help manage major incidents, it gives you a sense of just how much pressure is being placed on the system. Now let's move south into Oregon, because the situation there has its own complicated story. The Grasshopper Fire in north central Oregon has burned roughly 93,000 acres and is around 76% contained. That sounds like good news compared with zero containment on the Hawk Fire, and in some ways it is. Containment lines have held in several areas, and officials say the overall threat to communities has decreased. But the fire is still producing significant smoke, and firefighters are continuing mop-up, repair, and suppression operations. So a fire does not suddenly become harmless just because containment reaches 76%. There can still be hot spots, interior pockets of fire, falling trees, flare-ups, and smoke for days or even weeks afterward. And Grasshopper is especially important tonight because smoke is affecting communities around the Columbia Gorge. Areas including Pine Hollow, Wamak, Tyke Valley, and Maupin have been dealing with smoke impacts, while cleaner air has pushed into places like Portland and parts of the Columbia River corridor following a frontal passage. But that same weather system that is helping some western communities breathe cleaner air is not necessarily helping the fires. A front can bring cooler or cleaner air to one part of the region while producing stronger winds farther inland. And for a wildfire, wind can matter more than a small temperature drop. That is exactly why attention is also on the Austin fire near Mount Hood. It remains a smaller fire compared with Grasshopper or Little Giant, but it is far less contained, sitting around 5,300 acres with only about 7% containment. The nearby Narrow Fire is also uncontained. Evacuation levels in the surrounding Oregon counties range from lower-level readiness notices to GEO Now orders depending on the location. This is how wildfire seasons can become overwhelming. You do not need one enormous fire to create a crisis. You can have dozens of fires at different stages, all needing aircraft, engines, hand crews, command teams, and support personnel at the same time. The National Interagency Fire Center says exactly that is happening right now. 79 large fires are active across the country. More than 3.57 million acres are included in those active incidents, while year-to-date fire acreage has reached approximately 7.74 million acres. The 2026 total is already running far above the recent 10-year average, and that is why the Pacific Northwest is such a major concern. The region currently has the most large fire activity in the country. NIFC reports 15 large fires in Oregon and 13 in Washington, alongside major incidents in Idaho and Montana. Meanwhile, NASA satellite observations are continuing to show large clusters of active fire detection across the West. That does not mean every individual detection represents a separate wildfire. Satellite sensors can detect multiple hotspots from one large fire complex. But when you see large concentrations of nighttime detections over places that are already dealing with active incidents, it tells you something important. Some of these fires are not simply smoldering after dark. They remain active. And that matters because overnight is often when firefighters hope conditions become more favorable. When humidity rises and winds weaken, fire behavior can slow down. That gives crews an opportunity to work closer to the fire line, strengthen containment, and protect critical areas. But when winds remain active through the night, that advantage disappears. The larger weather pattern is also keeping forecasters concerned. An upper-level trough and changes in the jet stream are influencing the northern Rockies and Pacific Northwest. Parts of the region can see thunderstorms that produce lightning but very little rainfall reaching the ground. Those dry thunderstorms are particularly dangerous because they combine a powerful ignition source with vegetation that is already extremely dry. At the same time, hot and dry air is continuing to dominate parts of the interior West. An IFC is forecasting temperatures reaching the 90s and, in some areas farther south and east, even into the triple digits, while humidity can fall into the teens and lower levels. That is the fuel problem underneath all of this. Firefighters can build a line, they can drop water, aircraft can attack a hotspot, crews can bulldoze breaks through vegetation. But if the landscape is extremely dry and the wind suddenly increases, fire can still jump those defenses. That is also why spotting is so dangerous. A burning ember can be lifted by the wind, travel ahead of the main fire, and ignite another patch of vegetation. Suddenly, crews are not dealing with one fire edge anymore. They are dealing with new fires appearing beyond the line they were trying to defend. And that can dramatically change the situation in minutes. The long-range outlook is not especially comforting either. Time FC's August seasonal outlook called for above-normal significant fire potential to continue into September across parts of the West. That does not mean every day will be disastrous. It does mean the background conditions are likely to remain favorable for serious wildfire activity for some time. For Reno specifically, the immediate question is whether crews can slow the hawk fire enough to begin constructing meaningful containment lines. That is the milestone everyone will be watching. Right now, the fire remains at 0% containment in the latest available reports, but 0% does not mean firefighters are doing nothing. It means officials have not yet established enough completed line around the fire to report measurable containment. They are working, they are protecting homes, they are building lines, they are using aircraft, they are evacuating communities, but the fire has been moving faster than the containment effort has been able to catch up, and that is why Monday matters. The next operational periods could reveal whether the winds cooperate enough for crews to make their first real gains, or whether another round of strong afternoon winds causes the fire to push into new areas. We should also remember that the evacuation situation can change extremely quickly. A road that is open now can close later. A get-set zone can become go now. A warning can be expanded based on a single shift in wind or fire behavior. So anyone in an affected area should rely on official local evacuation information rather than waiting for a social media post or a video like this one to tell them when to leave. Washoe County has directed residents to use the official evacuation maps and emergency information channels, including Perimeter Map, for the latest zone and road updates. And please remember, evacuation information is not something to call 911 for unless there is an actual emergency requiring immediate emergency assistance. There is another issue that reaches far beyond the evacuation zones: smoke. You do not have to live next to a wildfire to feel the effects. Smoke can travel hundreds of miles, and NIFS specifically warns that communities far away from active fires can experience degraded air quality. That means places that are nowhere near a visible flame can still have unhealthy air. So if the air is smoky where you live, check the local air quality reading before spending long periods outside. Be especially cautious during heavy smoke periods, and remember that people with existing breathing problems, older adults, and young children can be more vulnerable to poor air quality. As we head through Monday, there are really two different wildfire stories unfolding across the West. And there are fires like Grasshopper, where crews have already made major containment progress but still have a huge amount of work ahead. There are fires like Little Giant, which have been burning for weeks and continue to expand despite massive firefighting operations. And then there is the Hawk Fire, a fire that exploded from a relatively new ignition into a major urban interface emergency in a matter of days. More than 42,000 people are under GO Now orders. Another 45,000 are in warning zones. 6 people have been injured. Structures have been lost. Major roads have been affected. The Nevada National Guard has been activated. And the fire remains at 0% containment. That is the story tonight, not just a number on a map, not just another red shape on a wildfire tracker. This is a rapidly changing emergency involving communities on the edge of Reno and firefighters who are working through difficult conditions to keep the flames from moving deeper into populated areas. The latest official figures available overnight put the broader national wildfire picture at 79 large fires, more than 22,000 firefighters and support personnel assigned, and more than 7.7 million acres burned so far this year. And the season is still going. That is what makes the next several days so important. For Reno, everyone will be watching the Hawk Fire's size, wind direction, structure losses, evacuation boundaries, and, above all, that containment number. For Washington, attention remains locked on Little Giant and the many other fires burning across the state. For Oregon, Grasshopper may be making progress, but Austin and other less contained fires are reminders that one fire improving does not mean the entire region is out of danger. And across the West, the weather will continue to decide how difficult the job becomes. So tonight, the biggest message is simple. Do not underestimate how quickly wildfire conditions can change. For those under Go Now orders, leave. For those in warning zones, be ready. Keep your phone charged, know your evacuation routes, and follow local emergency officials for the latest instructions. And for everyone else watching from outside the immediate danger zone, remember that the smoke, fire activity, and weather are part of a much larger system unfolding across the western United States. The Hawk Fire is still moving, the response is still underway, and Monday could be a critical day in determining whether firefighters finally begin to turn this fire around or whether another round of wind pushes the situation even further. We'll keep watching the official updates as they come in. Stay safe, especially if you are anywhere near an active fire or evacuation zone. And a huge thank you goes to the firefighters, first responders, emergency managers, and international crews working through this extraordinary wildfire season.